Hey guys, welcome back to the Discipline Life Podcast, the place where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Arya, and this is my husband, Coda.
Hello, everyone.
And I just wanted to take a minute and thank everyone who's been listening to us on YouTube.
Yeah.
We've gotten a great response, and just want to say thanks for that.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. It's really awesome to see that people are enjoying the content.
And if you haven't already and you're enjoying the podcast, please consider subscribing and give us your feedback. Let us know if there's any topics that you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
And we'll talk about this later, but we're going to want to point you to our Patreon later as well.
And today's topic actually did come as a listener suggestion. And so on today's episode, we are going to be tackling the topic of how to maintain authority structure and your power differential relationship when you are in mixed company or out in public.
I'm sorry I don't have like any confetti sounds or anything like that to say, yay, listener question. So, but, we want everybody to know you've been getting over a slight cold that you've had. So
yes. So if I sound a little winded or I sound a little out of breath, it's because I have had a horrible upper respiratory illness. And so getting over that, and
glad she's back on her feet.
Yes.
She had me worried there for a little while. So
anyway, getting into the topic of how to maintain your dynamic when you are out in public or in mixed company. Because I think for most people that I have come across that have this relationship structure, friends and family don't necessarily know.
Yeah. Well, we can definitely say in our relationship, we don't share that.
No.
And that's okay. Like, we're not advocating that you have to share it.
Right.
We don't share it.
If that's something that you feel comfortable with, then that's definitely like your call.
Right.
Most people like to keep this aspect, especially the discipline aspect, private.
Yes.
And so how do you continue to have that authority and that accountability when you're with other people, either friends, family, or just generally out in public?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, which is why we decided to do an entire podcast on it. I think taking a little of the initiative here, I think one of the first things is that you make that decision that you are going to keep this between the both of you. Because making that decision, you might go, oh, well, that's a pretty obvious a decision to make. But you'd be surprised how many couples not talking about that, about who they're going to share it with, who they're not going to share it with. By not having that conversation, when you get into a moment that you're maybe around family members, and you have one of those moments, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, where it's needed, or you got to take the initiative, whatever it is, and you haven't had that conversation, you find yourselves going, uh-oh, how do I handle this? Because you're not sure about how everybody in your family, relatives are going to perceive what is about to come next, depending on how you handle it.
So I would say that you need to kind of create systems that allow you to have almost an unspoken communication, or have some code words, or have some way to kind of have that warning, or have that, dynamic moment.
Right.
Without anyone else being aware of what's going on.
Right, exactly.
I think that it's pretty hard to hide a traditional relationship among family and friends. It's hard to present yourself as being modern or egalitarian.
Right. Right.
But there are ways to hide the discipline aspect, because I think that most people can respect or at least keep their opinions to themselves about you
Sorry.
having a
We
traditional
both smirked
relationship.
when we said that. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, if you have these traditional roles and you present that way, most people, they may not understand it. They may not even agree with it. But for the most part, they'll keep that to themselves.
Right.
Once people find out that you have a discipline aspect to your relationship, they're going to have very strong opinions, and they probably won't keep that to themselves.
Wait. We're in the day and age of social media and people have strong opinions? What are you talking about?
And so, in my opinion, speaking of, I just think that it's better to not have to explain yourself.
Yeah, and that's exactly, you segued perfectly into exactly what I was talking about. You want to have this conversation and you want to put the things in place, because in the heat of the moment, like when something happens, you don't want to be having that conversation then about that.
And so I think that there's a few ways to think about this.
Yeah.
Is if you're going into a situation that is at risk, right? I mean, maybe you're going to a family dinner, or you're going to a wedding, or you're going to some sort of get together. Lay some ground rules. Have like a pre-game talk, if you will.
Yeah, and that's kind of was exactly what I was saying. Pre-game talk is good for all you sports fans out there.
And just lay some ground rules. If you're going to a wedding and there's going to be drinking involved,
right?
Tell your wife, you're allowed to have 2 drinks.
Or whatever the limit is.
Yeah, whatever the limit is. Or if that's not something that you're going to partake in, just say you need to not partake in that.
Partake in that, right.
Or,
and if you do,
right,
here is the consequences for later. We're not going to take care of that at the party or reception or whatever.
And also, there should always be an expectation of, an attitude of respect.
Right.
And reverence. Just because she's in the company of women that kind of like to bad talk their husbands or talk down does not mean that she gets to partake in that just because it's a social situation.
That's exactly right.
And so just having those expectations and laying out those rules, I think is really good going into it. There are very few situations that I can think of that you can't excuse yourselves.
Right. And that's perfect. Again, my wife does a great segues into the things that I was going to say next. And that's exactly right. In those moments, whatever it is, you can see a rule has been violated, or there's something maybe that didn't get talked about in the pregame, as you said.
Or she's getting close to that.
Yes, or she's getting close to that. Perfectly okay. And we would definitely say, excuse yourself from the situation.
I was like, just go up to her. I know that you have done this in the past, not necessarily for this purpose, but just come up and just say, hey, honey, can I talk to you a minute?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know what instant. I was like, really? I have, but I know what instance you're referring to. Yeah.
Honestly, I think the reason you have is because you're trying to save me from a conversation that I don't know how to get out of.
Yeah, that's true.
But if you see her partaking in behaviors that you're not okay with, that are either crossing a line or getting close to crossing a line, just say, hey, honey, can I talk to you a minute?
Yeah.
Find somewhere semi-private to just have a quick conversation, just to say you need to watch yourself.
Yeah. And I'm sure this has happened in some domestic relationships. So tell me if you've heard this, Aria, with some social medias that you follow, whatever. The reason we say excuse yourself, do not be one of those jerks and confront your wife right in front of everybody. Again, this is part of the discretion of, do you want everybody to know your business here and what's going on? Like, don't do that.
Right, because I mean, the last thing you want is especially if you're amongst family or friends, people that you're going to have ongoing relationships and ongoing communication with.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is for them to have a notion of who you are in your relationship.
Exactly.
You don't want them to assume that there is some sort of control, coercion,
or
abuse.
Even domestic violence.
Right.
Like, some people we know don't understand the difference between domestic discipline, domestic violence, but you never want that to come up. Just be very, very careful.
Right. And so definitely excuse yourself. Also, learn the art of nonverbal communication.
Right. Exactly.
I think most women who are in a domestic discipline relationship will understand this statement, but a look can say a lot. And most husbands that have authority over their wives, they have a look.
Okay, so I have to ask, do I have a look?
Yes.
Okay. What is it?
I don't know how to describe it.
No, I was going to say, you probably can't describe it. That was if we were doing video, it'd probably be easy for me to turn to a camera or something, but for the audio, not so much. But no, I think you're right. We and this is something, did we talk about that, or was that something that just kind of naturally progressed in our relationship?
I think that's just something that developed.
I think so too, because I don't remember going, okay, if I give you this look. I think I just kind of had one, and you just kind of knew.
Right. And so I think that there is that nonverbal communication. I also think that there is, especially if you're in company where you're talking to other people and maybe your wife is getting a little out of line, the art of just, putting your hand on her knee if you're sitting down, or putting your hand on her shoulder and just kind of just tapping twice and
Morse code, does that work?
Just something to communicate.
Yes.
I hear where you're going with this, and you need to rein it in.
Now, one of the things that I think can be, and it's on the same subject line, that can be a little tough as well. What happens when you're in grocery store, right? Or one of these big warehouse stores like Sam's and Costco, and it gets a little stressful? Because I know people worry about that there. I know that from my experience, I've had to do that because my wife will be the first one to tell you, I'm not against social media, obviously, because we do a show and all this kind of thing, but I'm definitely one of these old men get off my lawn kind of things with social media, because I feel like it has really, had a negative impact on our society. So when I go out there, and there are some people that I think may not know enough about domestic discipline, or they don't like it, or whatever the reason they might have, it does make me a little bit nervous to enforce the rules a little bit. And I want to, and I'm not saying she's terrible when we go to the store. She's not, but I'm ready to do so. But I have to really be careful, I feel like, and this sounds crazy, figuring out who's around me if something like that were to happen, because you just never know who's listening.
Right. And I definitely think there needs to be an understanding of, even if you're having a situation that's inappropriate, that you as the husband need to step in and stop your wife from doing whatever she's doing. There needs to be an understanding that there will be consequences later.
Right, exactly.
And there also, I wouldn't even say you need to say anything explicit. You can simply step in and say, that's enough. Hand her the car keys and say, go wait in the car. I'm going to finish up here.
Right.
And hopefully that will be enough of a jarring experience for her to kind of stop.
Now, again, I want to emphasize, we haven't really had...
There's one situation that I can think of. I
know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to share it, that's fine. But
I was about to say, but that's within the last year. I can only think of one situation.
Right. It's usually not as bad, but I felt like this was a good thing to bring up because most of the time people are aware. They're in a grocery store, they're in a Walmart, they're in someplace, and being in a stressful situation or having some of the challenges that you can have in some of those stores, especially when they're busy, that's when this stuff can arise and you want to be ready for it.
Right. And so we went shopping this weekend and the store was particularly busy because it was the Saturday before Easter. And
everybody's going, you did what the day before Easter? Were you crazy?
I know. And we went together because we were shopping for something for your work. So you had to use your business account. So you had to be there. And because typically I will tackle these stores by myself because I can kind of navigate a little bit better.
And it stresses, I know it stresses you out, but it really stresses me out.
And I think because we had an understanding of our roles going into that, where I was like, okay, I've mapped out I did. I looked on the store's app and I found out where everything we wanted to get, what aisles it was on.
It was awesome. You did really good.
I mapped out the store. So it was like literally one lap around the store and we were done.
And it especially helped that my foot was hurting me that day. So that made it was great. She was on top of it.
And so I think having an understanding of our roles, but I just want to encourage the women listening to this podcast, if you are out in public with your husband or your boyfriend or whatever, let him take the lead as far as communicating with other people.
Yeah.
You do not have to take charge. You do not have to be the one communicating with the cashier or the waitress or
Correct.
Let him take that lead. He wants to lead.
Yes.
And especially when we as women get stressed out, we tend to be a little bit more emotional and a little bit more irrational and get more into that fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain. And men they just have this more natural ability to work through and get to the other side before they are like, man, that was stressful.
Well, and we had this kind of happen to us today as we're recording this podcast. We went out to eat and we were told there was a wait. We were fine with waiting, with the time that they told us we were going to have to wait. Then that time came and went, and we were very patient. I felt we waited about 10 minutes from the time, 10 minutes more than the time that they told us it would take. And I went in there, and I just told my wife, I said, you stay. I'm going to go in there and talk to him. And I wasn't rude, but I just they just said, well, it's going to be another 30 minutes. And I'm going, this is ridiculous. You told us this time. And I took care of it because I know that's not a situation. We've learned, haven't we, over time, that's not something you want to deal with, first of all, and it's stressful. So let me go ahead and take care of that.
Right, because when you went in the first time, you came back out and you're like, it's going to be another 30 minutes. And we had already waited almost an hour.
Yeah.
And we were told that the total wait time was going to be less than 40 minutes.
40 minutes, which if they had told us an hour or more, we probably wouldn't have stayed. We would have gone somewhere else.
Right. And so, but I had noticed that there was a lot of seating out on the patio. Right. And I was like, well, do you have to request the patio? Is that something that they don't sit unless you request it?
So I went in to find out.
Kind of like, most restaurants don't sit you at the bar unless you say
I want to sit at the bar.
Right. And so I was like, well, can you request the patio? Because there's several tables available there. And so he went back in, and it was so tempting for me to follow you in. Not at first, but that took you a few minutes. I think you were in there for like 10 minutes. And I was like, after a few minutes, I was like, should I go in and see what's happening?
Well,
and
partly it's because I had to wait because they had one hostess there, which was ridiculous. And she had to there were people that were getting seated, which were fine. which was fine. That I guess were ahead of us, but they were being seated. But it gave me a chance to look around the restaurant to go, there's even seats right here in the restaurant. What was going on? And what we found out is that the manager, who obviously doesn't know how to run their business, didn't hire enough cooking staff for the day after Easter, and so they were like 2 hours behind in fulfilling people's meal orders, and that's what was causing all of the backup. But that was part of the reason it took me so long, is I had to just stand there and just wait for somebody to come back to the front.
But it was very, very tempting, especially after it took more than just a few minutes. I was like, should I go in there? Should I go see what's going on? And I was like, no, because what's going to happen is they're going to say something stupid, and then I'm going to get upset, and I'm not going to be able to control myself because I'm hungry. I've been standing outside in the sun for an hour waiting to eat. I'm seeing other people eat on the patio that is well within my periphery.
And the food looks good, smells good, right?
And so I was like, no, I'm just going to let him handle it. He's going to come back out here and we'll see what happens.
And I basically came out and they said, and I told her exactly what was going on. I was like, you know what? I just don't want to stay. I think we should go. And you agreed.
I did agree. Absolutely. And we found somewhere else to eat. And it was
I
great.
will say we've learned from that going a different direction in the past. So that's just something from us getting better with, but I appreciated what you said, like learn from our mistake, which is just we have learned, but my wife especially has learned, just let him take the lead. So, and here's the other reason you do that. As I said, there are some rude people in the world because they think they can tweet it, then that means they can say it to me in person. And you all who are listening may know who you are. If you're one of those people, stop. But your wife doesn't need to put up with that. And so one of the reasons we have me take the lead when we're in those scenarios is so if someone is rude, if someone does something, guess who's going to take up the mantle? Me. She doesn't need to fight that battle. She doesn't need to do that. I am the one that is going to deal with that. And I think that's the way it needs to be.
I mean, if you trust your husband to lead in the home, you trust him to set rules and parameters for you, you trust him to set the direction of your home, to set the goals for your home, you trust and respect him in those areas, extend that to public.
Yeah.
You trust him to lead you, so trust him to handle those situations. Now,
and actually, when we went Saturday, I think we were able to navigate it really, really well because you had it mapped out. I was following where we were going. We were talking about how to navigate the crowd as we were going to avoid issues like that because there were people that were being rude and pushing shopping carts around people, and we just really communicated well. I thought that was one of the best communications we ever had was that day.
Yeah.
Because after I got out, I was like, wow, this is the first time I've gone into a place like that and haven't felt stressed out.
Well, that's good. It's good.
I didn't share that with you, but I thought I'd share it now on the podcast. But the point being is because we both got in our roles, we both trusted each other to do those things, and we executed it well.
And I think the reason I have been tempted in the past to kind of be more assertive and like tell those people the what for when they, aren't doing what they're supposed to do, or they didn't say what they were supposed to say, or they were rude or whatever, is because you tend to be a little bit more understanding. You tend to have that pause where you're really deciding like, okay, this happened, so how do I handle this?
Right.
Where I'm more reactionary. I'm like, you said this and now you're going to get it. And obviously that's not very feminine, first of all.
It's a good point.
That's not my role.
Another good point.
That then puts you into the position of not just handling the situation, but now you're trying to protect me from the onslaught of the situation that I just created.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then you're also irritated at me that I created the situation that you're now having to deal with. And on top of all of that, you're looking at me like now I have to I have to deal with this. I have to protect you. I have to handle this initial situation. Now I've got to go home and deal with your behavior.
So one thing, turned into 4 or 5 things. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Where if I would have just kept my mouth shut
And again,
and let you handle it.
Many of you don't know this, and I don't mind sharing it, but obviously my wife does. Part of the reason I pause sometimes is I'm a recovering person from anger. I went through anger management. And so one of the things that you learn to do is to pause, get yourself together and wonder, okay, is this a situation that I just need to get away from? Or is this really a situation that I need to be putting my foot down and getting the other person's face? Guess what? 9 times out of 10, it's really not worth it. They're just people that are just being jerks. They're not going to change. They're looking for a fight. They're looking for a reason to try to get into somebody's business. And 9 times out of 10, you just need to go, you know what? As long as you move out of my way, we don't have a problem.
And so once I learned to just trust your judgment and trust how you handle things got a lot better for me as your wife, to be able just to say, that's okay.
Right.
I'm okay. The situation's okay. Even if I come out of it thinking like, man, that guy or that person just was horrible. At the end of the day, it's better for me to let you handle it, because then I still get to be I get to still be in that feminine headspace. I still get to be in that submissive headspace, because when I become assertive like that, it throws me out of that submission. And then, right. And I think that that's really where the punishment aspect of that situation comes into play, because that basically, when I get assertive and I'm thrown out of that submissive headspace, then it's like, okay, well, now the punishment aspect is to basically say, no, you're not allowed to do whatever you want. You are under my authority.
Right.
And it puts me back into submission.
Correct. But you're right. I mean, since you have taken that approach, it's been better to go out in public. It's been enjoyable. And like we said, like a situation on Saturday would have really stressed me out in the past. But it didn't as much, because we went in as a team. We knew our roles. We stuck to those roles. We knew what we were there to accomplish. And it actually worked out quite well, even with all of the stupid people making dumb decisions in there.
And I think another word to the women out there, remember that your behavior, how you conduct yourself, how you conduct conversations, the words you use, how you behave, all of that is a reflection of your husband's leadership.
Good one. That should have like a star next to that advice. That's very good. Yeah.
And so you need to remember that and be a good representation of how your husband leads the home.
Yeah.
Because if you respect him, if you hold him in high regard, and then you're going out and you're acting like modern women, if you're acting like these women that just like to bash their husbands and talk about what an idiot their husband is and how he can't do anything right, if you're partaking in that and you claim to hold your husband in high regard and to hold your husband with high respect, and you're partaking in those types of conversations, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Because you cannot partake in those types of conversations, even if it's tongue in cheek, even if you think it's just a joke, everybody's laughing. It's not funny to your husband. I can guarantee you that.
That's a true statement.
And you cannot do those things and be a good representation of what marriage is, of what respect and honoring your husband looks like. And think about, your daughters young women, unmarried women that are looking at you, and you seem to have this great relationship, and then you're out there acting like women that just think that their husbands are this, that, or the other.
And let me piggyback on what you just said. And I'm going to talk to the guys that might be listening right now. That goes for you too. I never, if my wife does something that she was punished for or is going to be punished for, I never share that with anyone. Ever. Even my closest friends, I never share any of that. Why? Because again, that disrespects her to them. And I don't, and again, this part of our relationship is not their business. And so they don't get to hear anything that has to do with that. I won't even share that. I don't know. I know there's a wide range of beliefs of people that probably listen to us. So whatever you believe, don't be sharing that too with religious leaders or anything. That is between you and your wife. And so, men, you need to do the same thing. Respect is a two-way street. And if she's respecting, now that doesn't mean if she's disrespecting you, you have a right to disrespect her. No, but what I'm saying is that you need to be respectful. Keep that to yourself. Don't be going to your buddies going, well, you wouldn't believe what my wife did last night, but you know what? I'm going to make sure she stays in line. No, that's not what you do. You don't share that information. This stays between you and your wife, and you do the punishment or whatever it is that you need to do, and you move on, but you don't share that with anybody because that's disrespecting her.
That's a very good point. I just think there's just certain aspects of your relationship that you need to understand are private, but there's also aspects that, when you're out in public, if for women, if you're amongst a friend group and they're like, oh, my husband does this or my husband never does this and why can't he understand I need, don't partake in those conversations, or just be like, sometimes you can even get away with saying oh yeah, that can be really frustrating, but I just try to give my husband the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. Or I try to understand how hard my husband works at his job. So, I don't expect him to come home and do the dishes because I understand how hard he works. And I always try to give him, the benefit of the doubt that, he's tired or whatever it is. You just turn the conversation to be, you don't have to be now sometimes you may feel compelled to call those women out and be like, you need to not say that. That's
Depends on
that's
how
rude.
Close friends you are.
Right. But if you don't feel comfortable downright calling out that behavior, just turn it around and be like, I can see how that's frustrating, but I always try to give my husband the benefit of the doubt because he works really hard for our family.
Or if the guys' nights and the ladies' nights always turn into that, maybe that's I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too much, but that's a red flag to go, maybe I need some different friends.
That is a very good point. That's a very good point.
Set up some boundaries. Boundaries are good. We've been talking a lot about boundaries. Maybe we'll do a podcast on that. I don't know. But boundaries are good to set. And the boundary you need to set when you're out in public or things that happen in public, that stays between you and your wife. There's things that are agreed upon and how things are going to be executed depending on what happens before, during, and after wherever it is you're going, whatever it is that you're doing. And then those things are not to be talked about with others, though. I think you keep that close to the chest.
Mm-hmm. They're also, to kind of bring it back to the topic, because we've rabbit holed a little bit, but I feel like it's been a good conversation.
Yeah, I think these were good things.
But to bring it back to the topic a little bit, I think that when you're out in public, you need to have some ground rules, but also women, you need to be honest with your husbands if something happens without him there.
Yes, absolutely.
There needs to be a level of accountability for self-reporting.
Yep.
And I only say that because I don't know how other women view this, but for myself, if I did something that I knew was against the rules or inappropriate, and you weren't there, there's no way for you to know that happened, I would feel so guilty. I would probably...
You've told me before when something's happened. You've always been very honest.
Oh, yeah. I would feel so guilty because I would know that I did something that was out of character, that was unacceptable, that I should be punished for. And so definitely consider that, especially when your husband is not there, you are the only representation of his leadership in that situation, and you need to take that position in high regard. You need to take that very seriously.
That's another star point for you right there. That was really good. Yeah, I agree. Agree with that.
Do I get ice cream out of this?
Well, since we're recording this on Easter Monday, we'll have to talk about that. But maybe. I feel like we covered it, even though we rabbit holed a little bit. I feel like we did a good job covering it. Is there some other things that I'm forgetting that we should...
No, I was just going to say, to kind of summarize, when you're going into a situation that you know will be a possible trigger point, or even if you just want to set ground rules for any type of public outing, just sit down and set those ground rules, have a certain expectation of behavior, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable. Even if you don't cover everything in that conversation, most women are not unaware of bad behavior.
That's true.
They are very, very aware of when something is not acceptable.
Yep.
And so don't be afraid to say, hey, I know we didn't talk about that, but you knew you were out of line, and so I'm going to hold you accountable now. It's okay to do that.
Yep.
So just sit down and have a conversation about what's expected. Use nonverbal communication as much as possible. If that doesn't work, find a way to excuse yourselves to have some amount of privacy. I mean, obviously, public situations, there's only so much you can do. If your wife is completely out of line, and it's, again, if this is a possibility, send her out to the car, finish up what needs to be finished up in the store or whatever. If you're at a family gathering or a wedding or some sort of event, leave early.
Yeah, and it's okay to leave early.
But don't let the fact that you're in public dismiss the accountability that should be there.
That's correct.
So yeah. And if you are in public, something happens, make sure that you have a system of accountability or punishment or repercussions that happens once you get home or once it's appropriate. And what I mean by that is, if you guys are out with friends, she gets inappropriate, maybe she's been drinking, don't punish her when she's under the influence of alcohol.
Very bad thing to do, yes. Very bad thing.
First of all, her pain receptors are not going to function the same way, so you may end up over punishing to get the result that you're wanting, and then that creates future problems. Or she's not going to have the comprehension or the clarity of mind to receive the punishment. And so wait till the next day, but don't let those things go unpunished. Not
if you want them to change.
I was just going to say, the only way to change outcomes and to modify behavior is to have accountability and consistency.
Yeah.
And you can't just have this idea of oh, we went out of town, we're at my mom's house for Christmas for the week. Something happened on Monday and we didn't get home till Saturday. It's been so long, we're just going to leave it unpunished. That's not how things change.
Right. Yeah.
And so there needs to be some accountability there. And I would say if you're out of town and you're staying in someone else's home and something happens, it would be very wise, in my opinion, to figure out a way to say, oh, we're going to go to the gas station or we're going to go grab a coffee, and then drive away from that house so that you have privacy, and give her a lecture in the car and just let her know, like, this is not okay. This happened and I don't want that to happen again. And when we get home, you will have this consequence.
And be stern, but not ugly.
I was about to say stern, but not like...
But I would say kind. Stern, because you can be kind and not ugly. And so what I mean is you can be stern, but you know how some men, they will be downright ugly.
And what you mean by ugly is like berating, meanness, just... calling
names... those things.
Those are inappropriate. Those are a lack of control on your part as the husband.
Exactly.
And if you want to have control over your wife, you have to have control over yourself.
Yes, and so that's what I mean by be stern, but choose your speech very wisely and get your point across. Because if you don't do that, then you're just coming off looking like a you-know-what. Horses, yeah.
And nothing will make your wife lose respect for you more than if she feels like you don't care about her.
Exactly, that you're just being the police, basically.
So even in those moments of correction, you need to communicate and have an air of concern for her overall well-being.
Yeah.
And and
this goes back to one of the things we said in our past podcast when I talked about the tender warrior. You need the tender warrior.
Right. And so, yes, there needs to be accountability, and how that looks is going to look slightly different depending on the situation, depending on the couple. But I think the tips that we gave, where it's like, go in with a game plan, use nonverbal communication, pull yourself away to have a private talk if necessary. Those are ways that we have found have helped, but there has to be the follow-up with accountability at home.
Yep, has to be.
Things that I have heard, though, just as a final note, things that I have heard online that I would not suggest is I have heard people, and again, it's online, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Are these real people in real relationships, or are these people that are writing fantasy scenarios from their imaginations? But
it happens.
It does. And so I've heard people describe, the wife was mouthy out in public and he took her out to the car and spanked her in the parking lot. Don't do that.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. The only reason I'm laughing is I'm going, I really hope that was just
a fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy. Yeah.
A fantasy.
Fantasy. Yeah. But yeah, don't do that. Don't do that kind of stuff. That's treating your wife like a child. Your wife is not a child.
Right. And because she's not a child, you can wait till you get home. You can wait till the next day. You can wait till the end of the week.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And she's still going to understand what the punishment's for. She's still going to make the connection. The accountability still counts.
Exactly. No need to do that.
So.
Sorry. Anyway, just laughing and shaking my head.
I really should read these things to you sometimes, just so that you can laugh at them with me.
Sometimes I laugh at them, but as I mentioned earlier, things on the internet make me angry, which is why I put up boundaries. She knows I put up boundaries, especially with social media, because it drives me crazy.
Anyway, guys, just wanted to remind you all that if you want to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, please do. Yay. Give this video a like if you liked this conversation.
Patreon.
I was about to say, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this topic and you want to let us know that, or if you don't like the topic, you want to let us know about that too.
Or suggest a topic.
I was about to say,
this came from a listener suggestion or request.
If you have any suggestions for future topics, please give those to us. You can do that in the comments, or you can email us. Our email is down below in the description box. Follow us on Instagram at the is it the underscore discipline? Anyway,
sorry, you set that up.
I
she
did,
does all our social media,
and I haven't said it in a long time. But
that's okay.
Our Instagram handles are also down in the description box. So the podcast Instagram is the Disciplined Life podcast. No, the Disciplined Life.
Okay.
And then my Instagram handle, which is in my proper place, and we'd love a follow over there as well. And if you want early access to the podcast as well as written articles and behind the scene pictures, you can join our Patreon. The link to that is in the description box as well. So,
and again, I just want to thank everyone who has subscribed on YouTube and has gone and supported us on Patreon. We thank you. Glad you're getting good content.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
See you later.